I have got the wonderful pleasure of getting to welcome everybody to this amazing gathering of fellow travelers. I can see on the screen, I know so many of you, but this is the launch of Heading for Change that brings forward the vision of Suzanne and Daniel. And I just wanted to acknowledge the Heading for Change team, Samantha Anderson, whose title is Change Weaver, and Elizabeth Corrado, the head of investments. And also just to send the appreciation of all of us to the host committee, so many leading organizations in the gender and climate impact world. I know that you probably saw the logos on the invite, but Impact Assets is joined by 2X Global, Align Impact, Aspen Global Leadership Network, Corrales, Equality Fund, Gratitude Railroad, Impact Alpha, Invest for Better, Jewish Women Invest, Next Wave Impact, Tonic, Veris Wealth Partners, and Women in Money. And I just was really struck by seeing all those names together, all these amazing networks that some of us have been part of for years. And you all likely come to this through being involved in one or maybe even a few of them. But what's amazing to me is that Suzanne has been and is deeply involved in all of them, all 14 of them. And that's why we're all here supporting Heading for Change, in appreciation for Suzanne and Daniel and its vision as they started up with the first $1 million in capital for a catalytic endowment for climate solutions and gender equity, the intersection of those two, through high impact investment and field building philanthropy. Just an amazing, innovative model. And the idea of this kind of evergreen collective action of deep positive impact of fellow travelers, to me, is a really kind of meaningful one. And we're happy at Impact Assets to do our part in hosting the endowment of Heading for Change. We think it is important both in its impact and also in the innovation, as I said, of its design. But this idea of kind of radical democratization of collective action that can literally welcome in thousands of individuals and donor advised funds and foundation supporters into a community endowment for investing and grant making and field building to create this sort of demonstration portfolio of blended capital that can lift up and spotlight what a really fully realized strategic portfolio can be and what it can do. And also importantly, I think, provide educational engagement for the field around it at the intersection of, again, climate and gender investing. So Suzanne and Daniel, we're so eager and appreciative to have a small role in doing our part as you inspire us in your latest in a long time of passionate endeavors, and as you welcome in friends and network, as Suzanne, you always do. You always welcomed me in, and I really appreciate it. So here we are, and I think that we should hand it over to David Bank, the CEO of Impact Alpha, who's going to interview Suzanne and Daniel. And with that, David, let me pass it off to you to take it away.
Thanks, Tim. And likewise, we're honored and delighted to be part of this and to be with all of you, agents of impact, as we call you, and you know who you are, namely all of you. But Suzanne was a original agent of impact, at least for me, and very early on in our journey, she was an ally and a collaborator and an inspiration and a mentor. So I'm delighted to be here with you, Suzanne, and all of your many, many, many friends. So maybe let's just start off and just at the broadest level, tell us a little bit about the journey of Gender Smart and Gender Lens Investing more broadly, and then your interest in climate and the deep focus you've had in the last few years.
Thanks, David. Well, I'm here, and I'm also really happy to introduce Luna, who is here, who's the house cat, along with Daniel, my husband. And so you're getting to have all of us, and I promise that Luna would get a spotlight. So the endowment is part of her legacy as well.
Right. Although there was some controversy because she wanted to change the name to Pausing for Change, and we had to explain to her that didn't really capture our emphasis on action.
Yeah. So anyway, she may make appearances throughout the event. So the journey of Gender Lens Investing, I'm not going to talk about the whole journey of Gender Lens Investing. I can say that I've been investing this way for 22 years. I built and sold an ed tech business with an amazing founder, partner, Sandy Rand, who I think is on this call. And when we had our exit, I realized that I wanted to really pay it forward and invest in other women. And I knew all these amazing women who were seen, undervalued, and companies that were good for women in other ways beyond the founder, in supply chains, with customers, with employees, and thinking about the gender picture from, who was in leadership and governance all the way through to who was in value chains and all the way through to customers. And but I didn't realize that I was really helping to build a field by just investing my own capital. And I joined up with many of you on this call to really invest those assets and to learn, because it's all a learning journey. And around 2006, Joy Anderson approached me and Jackie Vanderbroek approached me and said, what we're doing here is we're really building a field. You're out there mobilizing women investors, you're mobilizing women donors to become investors, you're mobilizing people to invest in more women and invest in companies that were good for women and pay attention to gender patterns. And I think it's time for us to really think about how we're shaping this. And it took until about 2011 before we really started convening people, and that was Criterion started convening people, but SOCAP had been there all along helping us convene. And so now fast forward, climate has always been something on my mind, environment has been something on my mind, and then of course as we learned more about what's going on with climate, and at Confluence Philanthropy, I was talking a lot with all these climate investors about why weren't we shining more of a spotlight on where women were in the picture. And fortunately, Wallace Global Fund and Compton Foundation gave me my first grants at GenderSmart to get a climate and gender initiative off the ground and start to frame and name and define what it was we were talking about. And so in 2020, that got kicked off. So I've gotten to spend the last 3 years within the GenderSmart context, but also within my own consulting at Catalyst at Large and my own portfolio, really learning about this. What does it mean to bring climate and gender together? And I've done it with a lot of you, and I've learned from so many of you. So that's really the origin story around how did we come to this.
I see so many people already filling up the chat here, and I just want to encourage folks to share anything they like, obviously, on the chat, but also just who they are, where they're coming from, and maybe how they know Suzanne or where they met Suzanne or something. But Suzanne, in the middle of this, let's just get this out there, you got a diagnosis. So
Yeah,
tell us about that.
Yeah, so a year and a half ago, I got a very surprising diagnosis that I had stage 4 metastatic lung cancer. And I spent a pretty tough 4 to 5 months. And then I had a little bit honeymoon period for about 10 months. And during that time, I started thinking about and talking to Sally Bolter, who's here from Impact Assets, about whether I could create a DAF that would focus on climate and gender, or really be a gender lens investing DAF. And I wanted to learn and understand how that worked. And I thought, I'm not going to set up a whole foundation. I want to set up something that uses the structure that Impact Assets has built over these last years, that makes it easy for us to put in money, but then for other people to put in from, $100 or $1,000 all the way up to $1 million or $10 million. And to, as Tim said, democratize access for everyone to be able to be a donor partner. And then I got some, much worse news in January, February this year, where it was just very sobering about my condition. And at that moment that I got that news and started chemotherapy, which was the long sort of third thing in line that we had tried to see if we could address what was going on for me. I got really clear that I wanted to do one last project, and I wanted it to be using this DAF structure to create an endowment that would focus on climate and gender investing, where all the money would be invested with a climate and gender lens, that it would be best in class in terms of the climate side and the gender side, and the returns would be sort of a really diverse mix across a spectrum of returns. And that the grants that I wanted to do and talk to Daniel about were going to be about things that would build the field of climate and gender investing, and that would unlock more capital. And, my whole thing is always about how do we unlock more capital into impact. And so I wanted to double down and focus on those areas. And then as Daniel and I started talking about it, we added one more piece, and he's going to talk more about this, which is he's autistic, and we wanted to do some grants around neurodiversity, which we have fantastic ideas about. He has fantastic ideas about. So that's also in our grant making guidelines.
You say you got very clear. I remember a phone conversation. I think it was in the evening in California. I think it was very early in London. Maybe you called me because I was time zone compatible in some way. But I was amazed actually at how clear you have gotten about all this. And I think also, urgency as well, and the urgency obviously in your own situation, but then there's an urgency obviously around climate and these other issues as well. So just tell us a little bit about why combining climate and gender is such a powerful thesis.
So first is to really think about women as agents of change, and think about women as entrepreneurs, as fund managers, as leaders, as workers in those good green jobs, as customers who really are going to be the ones to really transition us from old ways of doing things to new ways of doing things. And we're in the venture capital space. It's very clear that we've been leaving a lot of women behind. People know that it's 2% of venture capital going to women, and much less, 0.6 going to women of color, and even worse if you get down to kind of indigenous. And I mean, just the state of the field around women and access to capital is just really horrendous. But you have these women who are making all this change and inventing and innovating, and that we've got the data and evidence to say that when women are in leadership, you get better climate outcomes, you get better risk management, you get better decision making around adopting new climate solutions and innovation. And yet people are still not seeing and acting on that. And when you have a desire to have energy access in rural communities, and you have women selling to women, like in frontier markets or in Barefoot Solar or in Solar Sister, you have the evidence that women selling to women, there's much better uptake. People really understand the feature sets and what people really want. And you have just much faster spread in a positive way of those innovations. And so if we're going to look at the 2.4 billion people who don't have reliable access to energy as an example, you got to have women in the picture. You got to have women in product design. You got to have women in sales. You got to have women in all the roles in distribution and as customers that are really going to make the changes. And that's just one example. So paying attention to where women have a differentiated experience in terms of the barriers to participation is where we go next. And really not just thinking about counting women, but really looking at what is women's experience? What are the gender differences? And how do we really think about those in a smart way? And just people aren't picking this up yet in a big enough way. So there's a lot of climate talk that doesn't mention women, doesn't mention gender at all. And really all climate investing should be gender smart. I mean, that's really just, what it is.
And you've been convening, obviously, through Gender Smart and otherwise. You have an climate advisory group and other networks. So you've really got a sort of finger on a pipeline. This kind of goes to one of the advantages or the differentiators of the fund, which is that you kind of know the field, the gaps, and as well as the opportunities.
Yeah, I mean, David, people have been calling me relentlessly for the last 3 years to say, can you tell me which funds are doing this? Can you tell me which entrepreneurs you're most excited about? Because they know that between Gender Smart and Kite Insights, who's been our content partner, and 2X, we have been really at on the front lines of talking to people who are making these investments happen. And we've been gathering and organizing investors. And with all the networks that are represented here today, you guys are at the leading edge. And so when I've shown up and said, hey, we'd like to do an event with you about climate and just get people really talking about it, I mean, I feel really privileged to be in a role where I get that access to information. And when people are designing new funds and thinking about designing new things, they've been calling. So, and then Project Sage, which is the report I've been working on with Wharton, has given me a carte blanche to basically talk to all these fund managers and say, which of you are focused on climate and which of you are actually looking at this from a deeper perspective, or it's your whole fund, or it's a part of your fund. And, how are you also thinking about adjacent areas?
I think this was the moment where we were going to put up a slide with some of the opportunities and what you're excited about. Do we have that together?
No, I think we did. I think we ditched it. I think we just said, the reality is that water, which is really, the climate crisis, very much a water crisis. And you think about, droughts and floods and ocean issues and wildfires, which require water and access to, all the leakage that happens from water and moving hot water and moving water from one place to another. The crisis is very much about water. It's about energy. It's about fashion. It's about the built environment. It's about agriculture. And it's about access to energy, of course, which is, one of the top things. And I just read you one stat. The fashion industry, which is not where I started actually, which is very gendered in terms of its workforce, 2 to 8% of global CO2 emissions, greater than all the international flights, all the maritime shipping combined. And its water consumption stats are even worse. And we're talking about 215 trillion gallons being consumed by the industry each year. And so, that's just one industry. That's just one area where you got to really look at what are we doing and why aren't we making change? And so, and then you think about energy access and you think about, where are the places who is most affected by the fact that we don't have access to, reliable, consistent energy. And in a lot of cases, it's these households that just are in places where, it's the women who then are going and fetching firewood and paying extra for kerosene and putting themselves at risk in terms of indoor air pollution and risk of fire. That because you have lack of access to energy. And so you can go sort of area by area. Part of what is happening for Liz and I, as we look at these funds, is that we know what we're interested in, what Project Drawdown is telling us from a climate standpoint, where are the biggest impacts and where can we make the biggest difference? But we also need to see where the fund managers are. We need to see what it is they're finding and funding. And so, we may not have started out with manufacturing. We may not have started out with apparel. And then we need a fund manager who's, working on manufacturing and saying, we need to green all this manufacturing. We need to green, of course, the mobility. And so you find a fund manager who's really focused on that. And you start to then shape together your investment thesis. And you can't just be sitting in New York and London and deciding this is what we're interested in. You have to also be really responsive to what's going on in the market.
Well, so one of the things I think that's going to be most compelling is Heading for Change is kind of the open source perspective, and folks obviously I think we'll hear a little bit more about the details of joining the endowment, but also just the public nature of the portfolio and the stories you're surfacing will let other folks co-invest and see and sort of catalyze. And I like what you said is there's all kinds of flavors of catalytic capital, but one of them is being able to help just tell the story of these funds like you're doing just now.
Yeah, and I think I used to, in the early days when I was telling the story about gender lens investing, I used to carry around chocolate bars. I don't know how many of you were there in those days where I would bring my set of chocolate bars, and I looked and realized that I had all these chocolate bars, not from back then, but recent ones in my cabinet. And I would say, you could have a conventional chocolate bar, which, was just good chocolate, but nothing special about who owned it or what was in the supply chain. You could have, a chocolate company that was women owned, women led. You could have another company where, it was all about who's in the supply chain. And just like you can have different flavors of chocolate, you can have different flavors of capital and different approaches. And I think it's important that each one, love it, Eve Blossom, each person can say, I really want to think about the workforce. I really want to think about the customer base. I really want to think about, who's in the supply chain. And So for us, we are totally committed to storytelling. We're totally committed to transparency around our investment thesis, our criteria, what we look at climate and gender. We're looking at the fund managers, what is their composition as well, and what are their policies and practices, as well as what they're doing with their portfolio companies, and how are they working with their portfolio companies to help them get more gender smart or more climate smart if that's what they're missing. And part of what we're assessing as we're going through and talking to these fund managers is, do we really believe that they're going to be able to bring those folks on a journey? Because we know that not everybody starts out, everybody's, developing their companies. Not everybody starts out being perfect on these things, especially because a lot of this is new. And then we want to work with people actively. So we also want to share how it is we're doing value creation, how it is we're adding value, and we're relying on a lot of people on this call to be part of that picture, so that when we get a company or a fund manager, because we're going to invest in funds, we're not going to invest in individual companies. We may tap you and say, hey, I know that you're working with people on how to get gender smart in that kind of a business or that geography. And so can you come and help? And that might be paid help, or that might be pro bono help, or whatever it might be, but to really leverage our community that we've built over the last 12 years, which is really kind of how long we've been doing this really seriously, this work. So that transparency, part of what we want to do is educate, inspire, activate people to come on this journey with us.
Let's talk just a little bit about the grant side as well, and bring Daniel in, but tell us how you think about that part of it.
So we've got a small but powerful grants investment grants advisory group. And we've said, some of the grants are going to be about catalytic grants that are going to help unlock more capital to climate and gender investing. Some are going to be for organizations that are already up and running that need a boost. And then Daniel's here on the screen. Some of them are going to be about neurodiversity. So I'm going to turn it over to my fabulous husband.
Daniel, we had a great conversation a week or so ago about neurodiversity issues, and I learned a lot. So just tell us how you're thinking about your part of this.
Thank you, David. So I'm really excited to be here launching Heading for Change today. And I just want to say I'm super proud of Suzanne for all of her leadership over the years in so many ways. As Chief Ursine Officer, and you can see our website for more info about this role, I'll be taking on some new challenges, but I'm also going to be bringing my advocacy work, which I've been doing for the last several years around autism, neurodivergence, and disability to a whole new level through the endowment. One aspect of my autistic brain is a strength in systems thinking. So I can see the connections from the flawed theories of so-called experts in autism, such as Dr. Simon Baron-Cohen at Cambridge, who I think has got pretty much everything wrong, to a society that sees autistic people as broken, to therapies which seek to fix autistic people rather than nurture us, to charities such as Autism Speaks, which aims to perpetuate all of the above wrong thinking, and most definitely does not speak for the autistic community. Honestly, many of us consider them a hate group. I see the need for a lot of systems change. We're currently working on the criteria and framework for grant making, so hopefully we'll have something to share fairly soon about this in the months ahead. And I also want to say, well, this isn't about grant making, and this won't be part of the investing strategy for Heading for Change. I'm also developing guidelines for fund managers to help them perform autistic-centered due diligence. And one thing I'd like to highlight is it may be honestly the case today that 100% of the deals you might see around providing therapies for autistic children are actually providing services that my community considers abuse. I honestly don't think it's unfair to describe behavioral therapies such as ABA as gay conversion therapy for autistic kids. So please stay away. Honestly, until the systems change work starts to get traction, I think the best positive impact you might have in my space is to move your money somewhere else, maybe gender and climate. Of course, we will, as we find positive ways to invest in the autism space, happily share those with you.
Daniel, you referred everybody to the website, but I don't think anybody can miss the beautiful bear behind you there. So give us the short version of what a chief Ursine officer, why Ursine?
Well, the short version is in my writing, I actually use bears as a metaphor for autism. And I'm actually right now writing an article based on that very idea. Being autistic, one of the ways that I interact with the world is that honestly, none of the jobs out there actually feel like comfortable fits for me. They're all sets of skills where I have some of them, but not all of them. So it always feels like an uncomfortable fit. So I kind of actively feel like what I always need is a custom job description just for me. And I figure, since I'm obsessed with bears, it's one of my special interests, that just being the chief Ursine officer, people don't really know what it is, but people are always surprised by how amazing bears are. So I think the answer, when somebody says, well, what is it that the chief Ursine officer does? I'll just say, more than you can imagine.
Very good. As Samantha's saying, please do put some questions in the chat line. And Suzanne, do you want to just say a little about the sort of structure of the endowment and how you're thinking about it?
Yeah, so we put $1 million in. We are hoping that we can get it up to, 3 to 5 million at the minimum. And up to 10 if we really go for what we would like. The more money that comes in, the more funds we can invest in, the more we can show, and the more grant making we can do, and the more storytelling and sharing of our process and our approach we can do. But if people come into the endowment, they'll have a front row seat and they'll be invited into things with meeting with our investment committee, meeting with our investees. We also are going to create community between our investees and our grantees, and amongst the people that come in as donor partners. The next part of it is that, of course, we're then making the investments. And so people can just know that the minute they're join as a donor partner, they are a climate and gender investor, because even though they won't see that money back, they will know that the money is really being deployed in that direction. And Liz and I are very committed to getting this money deployed by the summer, the first tranche of the money deployed by the summer, because we're deep in conversations with fund managers now, and we're super excited. And I have a sense of urgency, as you can imagine. I have an amazing investment advisory group, which you can see on the website, and 1 or 2 more people are being added. And that group will take these ideas forward and become a proper investment committee when I'm gone. I'm just going to, say it right out there. But right now they're really advising myself and Liz and me as the trustee who's making the decisions for right now. On the grant side, we will start making grants when we hit 2 million, and we're getting close. We're at 1.6 million, and we're incredibly grateful that Skoll Foundation has come in with a significant grant. Loudest Foundation has come in, and a number of other people have come in so far, even though today's our official launch. And we are, we're hopeful that we're going to have more capital to deploy then into the grant pot as well. So if you then come in as somebody who is part of the endowment, you then have that front row seat, and that you're part of the grants and the investments. If you don't come in to the endowment, but you follow us into the deals, the funds that we're investing in, and most of the funds that we're investing in are going to be illiquid. They're private markets, venture capital, private debt, private equity, venture debt, with illiquid profiles. And we're gonna do some really catalytic things, and some things that are gonna need to really be patient capital. And we're going to do a little bit on the public market side, because we need the liquidity, and because we do want to show what good looks like on the public market side. So that's so people can just follow us into the funds that we're in, and that will also be success from our standpoint, is that we want people to invest in these funds, and we want to unlock more capital into these extraordinary fund managers, in some cases who are just having an unreasonably hard time in the market because of where the market is right now. And a lot of them are women and BIPOC women in particular. And we just really want to dispel the image that pioneer fund managers are, more risky in some way or are not worthy of investment. We really want to show people that we can build an amazing portfolio.
Samantha's feeding me questions, so I don't always know who the original questioner was, but here's one. What are the criteria for a gender climate fund being funded and staying funded and being ejected?
Okay. So being funded, we are developing right now all of our criteria, and we're getting granular down to the level of course, the 2X criteria is fundamental. So looking at ownership and leadership governance, thinking about where people are in the workforce and thinking about supply chains as part of that, and then thinking about women as customers, but then getting to the next level of saying in this particular kind of deal in forestry or in water, in a water project or a sustainable fisheries project, what does it specifically look like? Where's the specific gendered opportunity? And so we're developing out all of that criteria now. So that people are going to need to meet that criteria to come into the portfolio. If we feel like from a gender perspective, they're not quite there, then we're going to be willing to, in many cases, work with people and put terms in the term sheet if we can, otherwise side letters that really say, we believe you can get to, 30 to 40% women in governance. We believe you can get to, a particular level of pay equity. We believe you can get to really thinking about your people practices overall or your supply chain practices overall by a certain date. And we really would, I've done this in deals so far, in my portfolio so far. In many cases in these side letters, we're going to reserve the right to come out of these deals. And that's going to be a relationship based decision with the fund manager to say what feels fair. And it can't just be us sitting there and saying, this is what feels fair to us. It needs to be a dialogue. But our goal is to really say our capital is limited and it's meaningful and we're there to help you. But really, we need to see you make these changes. And so that would be what would kick somebody out of the portfolio. We also want to talk to people about, we may decide not to do an investment. And it's not because it's not a good climate and gender investment, but it may be because it's not in our thesis in terms of the areas that we think are most important or some factors that we think are really critical, but they may be really interesting to other people. So Liz and I have been talking about how are we going to telegraph to the market what some of these other investments are. And I think that's important. And I think we don't do that enough in our space. And of course, we don't want to have unintended negative consequences because we didn't pick somebody for some reason that people think that they're not that good. There may be great things that we don't choose because they just didn't meet our criteria. So we want people to know about that.
Well, speaking of thesis, another question. I'm interested in women in emerging markets and poor, low and middle income countries and communities. Is there any thinking or thesis for those communities? And who else is interested in this space?
Yeah, well, I think people on the call could chime in because I think there are a lot of people that are really interested in that. I think, for us, one of the criteria is to think about where are people disproportionately in poverty or, needing to, come up out of poverty level. It's not a core criteria for us. I know it is for a number of people on this call, but there are definitely a number of funds that we're looking at where that is part of the core thesis. And I think part of what will be valuable about people being in the community is people telegraphing to each other what they're interested in so that they can find like-minded people to co-invest with.
Will you be investing across the returns continuum? Do you have some funds in mind?
We definitely are investing across the returns continuum. And we've talked to some community investment oriented vehicles and some vehicles that feel a little bit closer to reparations on the Indigenous side and the racial equity side. That's not to say that all of them are in that mode, but there are some that feel really compelling to us because of the approach they're taking. And so we're very willing to do that. And then we're also looking at some very commercial funds and fund profiles. And we have this belief that we can be catalytic in some places. We can shine a spotlight on really good funds in other places and add value in other ways. And we can go into mainstream climate funds in other places and be kind of the mosquito where we're buzzing around and we're biting potentially, and we're maybe very small, but we're making a big impact by saying we really want someone to be focused on gender equity, and we're going to ask hard questions. And if the fund manager is open to that and open to going on a journey, I had a great call with a mainstream climate fund manager yesterday. That's exciting too. And then we want to shine the spotlight on that. And so, yes, on the returns continuum, and yes, on really thinking about the role that our capital can play and that we can play as active owners and stewards.
On the grant side, are other ecosystem actors like incubators and accelerators who play an important role at the nexus of climate and gender eligible for grants?
They're not eligible. So we've decided that, well, I'm not going to say that right off. If they're really working on something that is going to unlock more capital from the investor community towards climate and gender investing, then they could be eligible. And we haven't really had our first meeting of the grants committee yet. So we have to talk about that. I think we've been thinking about things that would be structural things that would be focused on the investor community. But there, of course, are some incubators and accelerators that are building investor networks. And so, if I think about Miller Center and I think about a few others that have done a good job around that, we have relatively small grant pot. And so we just have to be, really judicious about how we deploy that
But
resource.
just to be clear, you're saying the grants
Yeah.
are really about unlocking capital. That's the thesis there. Yeah.
They are. So it's not about improving things for the entrepreneurs. We think that there are a lot of people who are doing that work. And by the way, I had a great conversation with the folks at USAID today, talking about their new $250 million facility, which is going to be working with accelerators and incubators and all kinds of other actors in the system to unlock more capital and more resource around climate and gender. And they're in a good position. This facility is being run by Chemonics, and they have other players that are involved. They're in a really good position to be supporting those kinds of initiatives. And one of the things that we also want to do is we're talking to people who have TA and who have technical assistance grant funds that can pay for a fund manager to get gender smart. And so even though we're not going to be able to do that, if we believe that somebody really would benefit from an intervention that would be done by one of the excellent players that are in the market, then we're going to be able to point people to where that money is and where those resources are. And it might not be the right money at the right time in the right place. We all have been through that before. But at least we're going to be in a position where we know where some of those pools of support are.
Here's one that I like. Is anyone doing the work of collating impact funds and investment opportunities in a database, especially for women and climate entrepreneurs?
Do you want to talk about that, David?
What?
Why don't you talk about that and I'll talk about that.
I'm just saying that
Yes.
we are moving to create such databases across the board, but that's high on the list, obviously. That's why that question popped up out of the list here.
Yes, look to Impact Alpha and stay tuned on that one, because I've been talking to David about this for a while. And I feel like one of the maybe top 10 reasons why people aren't investing with a climate and gender lens is they don't know where to find the deals. They don't know where to find the funds. They don't know where to find the individual deals. And so when anything that would help make that easier for people, I'm also talking to Audrey Salian about maybe doing an ARTHA for climate and gender. And we're looking for a good home for that. If that were something that were to be, that is a database of deals and funds where then the investors can come together and share due diligence. I'm really excited about that as a potential solution. And I feel like it's been one of my barriers, is not being able to know in one place to then search on, women and water in Africa, for example, or to search on, any particular thematic that I want to be able to double down on. And on the fund side, people know that I've been doing this research with Wharton around Project Sage for all these years. 2X is now picking up the mantle on that with Sagana. And there will be a new version of Project Sage, which will take people through something like 400 funds that are out there with a gender lens, and will spotlight the ones that are climate, and will spotlight the ones that are 2X, they're going for 2X qualification. And so that will be another resource that will be out there. So I'm really excited about that.
there are a number of specific questions about soil carbon and about reproductive health, but let's hold off on that. Here's a good one you might like. How can we help on this bold and important vision?
I love it. So, and thank you. Prime Coalition has a fun database. Claire, thank you for that, because I didn't know that Prime Coalition had that. And I don't think they talk about gender, but that's a good thing for us to follow up on. So how can people help? First of all, I would love for all of you to be part of the endowment. I think all of us on this call would love for you all to be part of the endowment. And whether you have $1,000 or you have $10,000 or you have $1 million, we want you to be part of this. And we want you to help us spread the word, as you have remarkably done over the last week or so. I just saw that we had 70,000 impressions of the article that I posted, and that's because a lot of you reposted. I'm so appreciative. It just goes straight to my heart that how much you care about me and about this work and about all of it. So I think, spreading the word and thinking carefully about, is this somebody who you think would care about climate and gender? So thinking about, who has capacity, but really everybody has capacity. Everybody can be a climate investor, and everybody can be an investor in our DEF. So the third thing is, if you know of funds that are climate and gender, that are good on climate and gender, please do send them our way. And Liz, I don't know if it's okay to have people send them your way. So she's Elizabeth at headingforchange.org. We really appreciate your adding a few lines about why, and if you know them, make an introduction. That's really helpful to us. Joy Anderson and I have had many conversations about how do we leverage our remarkable community to come in and really help these fund managers. As I have always done in my private investing, I've built $1.5 million portfolio over the past 20 years. And I have always, when I make an investment, worked to amplify, let people know that fund, is there, or that company is there and what they're doing, but also help them and really add value. And so if you're in a position to add value to one of these climate and gender funds, especially, or their portfolio companies, we really want to sort of build a little database of people who'd be in a position to do that. And that's something we're trying to figure out, what's the structure and how do we do it? We haven't entirely figured that out, but that's another way that you can help. And then on the grant side, if you know about people who are building something that is going to unlock more capital for investors, to make it easier for investors. And we have lots of ideas about where we think the holes are. But if you know about projects like that, or you have a project like that, make sure that's visible to us. And then let people know about this endowment, because I would like to see this unlock a lot of private wealth. I just want people to understand that now is not a time to sit on the sidelines. Now is a time to really unleash your capital. And this group of people, all of you are, you all know this already, and you're all doing it, and you're helping people do it. And I see Paul Herman straight and like in the middle of my screen. And he's done so much along with so many of you to really look at those barriers and say, there's not product, let's build product. There's not knowledge, let's build knowledge. There's not training, let's build training. There's people need to be connected, let's connect people. And so we have to make this happen, and we have to make it happen now. And of course, I have this incredible sense of urgency. I wake up every day and I make every day count, and my team helps me make every day count. But all of us should have this sense of urgency. I mean, the climate crisis, the gender equality crisis, the racial equity crisis, the healthcare crisis. I mean, it's all connected, and we have what it takes. We have what it takes to really solve this. And I really believe that. Otherwise, I wouldn't be doing this. I would just be honestly hanging out with Daniel and saying, okay, how am I going to spend the rest of my days? But I believe this, and this is what gives me hope. So I want people to really just, feel it, that we've got to have this sense of urgency, but we can have joy. We can have chocolate. We can have champagne and music, and we can have poetry, and we can do this together. So that's what I really want people to be thinking about.
Thank you, Suzanne. You'll be amazed when you get a chance to go through the comments here. There, and somebody said just now, there's a lot of social capital here and also a lot of urgency. I think, speaking of joy and champagne, we're going to have a kind of virtual toast here. So I'm going to turn it back to you, Tim, to lead that part.
Great. Oh, wow. It's like be the full spectrum capital mosquito. That really jumped out. We need to own it. Gosh. So yeah, how can we accelerate all of this together? I think, you said it, Suzanne, everybody and all of our friends and fellow travelers should be part of this together, this amazing initiative. And I think there's going to be a follow-up with some detail, whatever you'll get the punch list of like what you can do and how easy it is. And it really is. There's no subscription docs. This is a philanthropic endowment. It's just click here and become a card-carrying Heading for Change agent. And so I think I know I will, and I'm sure everyone on this call will at least consider it. So do join in and spread the word. And I think that I'm going to leave it there because I want to make the room now, other than just acknowledging the sort of the joy and the power and the urgency of the message that you've delivered, both you and Daniel, to open it up to a few amazing women who are going to offer some inspiration and appreciations, and I think a toast to kind of take us home here as we're coming towards the conclusion. So with that, let me pass it off.
And then I get to make a toast.
And you get to make a toast. And thank you so much, everybody, for contributing to this.
Thank you. Thank you, Tim.
Right. I guess if I'm spotlit, that means I go next. So cheers to you, Suzanne and Daniel. Just to say that you'll always be my favorite mosquito to start out with. And more than that, I think Suzanne and her work has always been at the leading edge. So everything that you've described today and everything that Heading for Change is about is really setting a new course for what gender smart climate finance can look like, from the relational approach of how you're deploying the capital to the intersectional guidelines that you're setting, this concept of the circles. I think it's really going to set a new course for how to do this well. And just seeing this community here, we're all here to support and carry this forward. So cheers to you and much love from everyone.
Thank you, Sana. Jackie, you're on.
Oh, so as I was thinking about this morning, I had this image that just burst through my head of this amazing web of all these people, really all these jewels shining around the world. And the way that, Suzanne, you've been the weaver that's made people shine brighter, that's invited all of us. All of us have known you in different ways, some longer, some more recent, some very professional, some much more personal, some coming in from women's philanthropy, some coming in as climate scientists, some coming in as women who have raised money, as women of color and broken through those barriers. And yet there's this web. And so I'm so honored to be one little part of it. I'm so honored to see everyone here and so grateful. And I feel like what you've just given is an abundant invitation, an invitation that says, this is the moment now, right? This is the moment to step in with Heading for Change, to step in for whatever our individual sphere of influence is, and to step it up. So thank you. Thank you, Daniel.
Thank you.
Hello. Suzanne, you did ask for poetry. So in honor of Heading for Change, I wanted to share a small poem. Among many things that we've shared over our long friendship, Suze has been a deep love of poetry and song. So it felt apposite to share a sonnet by Rilke at the launch of Heading for Change. And the poem is one of the sonnets to Orpheus, very apt here because Orpheus transforms himself through the power of his song, and Heading for Change is one among many of both your transcendental songs together, Daniel and you, Suzanne. So here's the poem. It's called Sonnets to Orpheus by Rilke. Want the change. Be inspired by the flame, where everything shines as it disappears. The artist, when sketching, loves nothing so much as the curve of the body as it turns away. What locks itself in sameness has congealed. Is it safer to be gray and numb? What turns hard becomes rigid and is easily shattered. Pour yourself like a fountain. Flow into the knowledge that what you are seeking finishes often at the start and with ending begins. Every happiness is the child of a separation it did not think it could survive. And Daphne, becoming a laurel, there's you to become the wind. To Heading for Change, to Daniel, to Suzanne, and to the community for change that is gathered here. Here's to us.
Thank you, Shalaka. Extraordinary. Tracy.
Hello, everybody. I'm very excited to be here. I'm excited to go to London and especially to meet Daniel. I'm wearing glasses in honor of you two. I'm trying to step up my glasses game here. And I'm in New York right now, and I've been in San Francisco and New Orleans on this trip and experienced what people are trying to do around change. And I would say that we could actually call this leading for change, because that's what Suzanne and now Daniel have always done. I feel like this is going to punch way above the weight of just the capital, but just the highlighting, especially women of color who we know are having great issues, me one of them, raising funds. And this will shine a light. And instead of copying, pasting Silicon Valley type funds, Suzanne and Daniel know that women of color are innovating, and we're not just pinking and blacking and browning and greening Silicon Valley. We're really approaching this differently because we see different problems. So thank you always, Suzanne and Daniel, for highlighting us. You know, you trust us, and a lot of people don't trust women of color. And so much love to both of you guys. I can't wait to see you in London.
Thank you, Tracy.
Oh, welcome. This is a magical experience being with all of you. I have to acknowledge Jackie for holding the jewel and the weaving. But I just want to honor the fact that we get to meet in our lifetimes maybe a handful of fierce, badass goddess warriors. And you, my friend, are one of them. And we're honored to be connected. I've woven your life in this toast, so you have to listen closely, okay? Not your whole life, your impact, all right? So on behalf of the Women in Money community and all the students who are now gender smart, who have learned, been mentored, played with, and collaborated with you, Suzanne, thank you. Thank you for your tenacity and your dedication. Thank you for your treasure trove of SAGE, Project SAGE wisdom, offering limitless strategies and possibilities for us all to drive a mandate for gender lens investing. Thank you for being a visionary, guiding us to the future we all seek and dream about, where women have agency and a voice, all women, and investors are embracing the woman effect. For me personally, you're my gender avenger sister in spirit, and I so appreciate that you've been a catalyst at large in my life and so many people's lives on this call and around the world. And so for all of us who honor and respect this badass community, I'm a fundraiser by trade, decades. I would ask that the Headed for Change investment thesis we've all heard so strongly about, that we all invite ourselves to make a gift that is 2 times double, 2 times global, what a meaningful gift is for you. So I really appreciate people doing that and stepping into this. I'm part of the Small and Mighty Grants team, so I look forward to moving those resources in partnership with all of you. You know, the thing I love about Suzanne is she came out early as a giver, and what I mean is she was public about all where she gave, and so we all can do that. So thank you, Suzanne and Daniel, for your compassion, your love of humanity and belief and generosity. Blessings.
Thank you so much, Tootie. That was really beautiful. Now I'm going to raise my glass, and I want to really celebrate all of you. You are the innovators, the change makers, the pioneers, the first ones in the pool, and then often the amplifiers. You're the ones who have really brought gender smart investing into your worlds, sometimes kicking and screaming, sometimes just with the unbelievable joy. You built this ecosystem. All of us together are building this ecosystem. And so what gives me hope, especially as my time is limited, is that you're all there to carry this forward. And you are the ones who are going to make this happen. I get to put my imprint on this as long as I can. And it might be longer than we think, or not. But you're the ones to make it happen. And I just want to really celebrate all of you. And so somebody sent me a note this morning that said, praying that you experience overwhelming love, mind-blowing peace, and complete wholeness. And thank you, Charity Wallace, for sending me that note. And I just want to celebrate all of you and really thank all of you for all that you're doing, and my extraordinary team and our amazing global stewardship circle and investment advisory circle, our grant circle, and all of our co-hosts. And just thank you. David Bank, you've been an amazing partner. Tim, you've been an incredible partner, along with Sally on this journey. And just thank you.
Be in touch with us.
Don't be strangers.
If you love somebody, better tell them why they're here, 'cause they just may run away from you. You'll never know quite when, well, then again it just depends on how long the time is left for you. I've had the highest mountains, I've had the deepest river. You can have it all, but life keeps moving. I'll take it in, but don't look down. 'Cause I'm on top of the world, eh? I'm on top of the world, eh? Been waiting on this for a while now. Paying my dues to the dirt. I've been waiting to smile, eh? Been holding it in for a while, eh? Take you with me if I can. Been dreaming of this since a child. I'm on top of the world. I've tried to cut these corners.